My name's Christian. Welcome to the channel. This is my Porsche Boxster S. It's my first car. I'm going to talk about why this is a good unorthodox choice for your first car. There's good and bad. We'll get into it. Let's go. Okay, before we get started, quick history lesson. Don't know why I'm putting my seatbelt on. Okay, so interesting things about this car. I think it's always cool to have cars that are like canonically important in the history of the brand, in the history of motoring in general. This I would consider one of those cars actually. Porsche in the early 90s, when they were kind of theorizing what to do, when they replaced the 928 and 968, which were kind of big, sort of like almost muscle cars. They had V8s at the front, transaxle, so they were quite good handling, but grand tourers really. They needed a volume seller. Now, Porsche basically only had the 911, aside from those other models I just mentioned, and really the company was in quite dire financial straits. What they did was they decided to mass produce a roadster, and that's where the Boxster comes in. So I think they first theorized designing this in 1991. They came out with a concept car a few years later that looks insane. I would love for someone in the future to do a kind of resto mod for something like that. But basically, they launched this in the late 90s. People didn't like it very much. The 996 came shortly after. People also didn't like that very much because it shared a lot of parts with this. They both had fried egg headlights that everyone hated at the time, but are actually quite cool now. It's one of my favorite parts of the car, really. But the key thing really with this car was that it was a cut price Porsche. You know, this was a sports car. It was competing with stuff like the BMW Z3 at the time. That opened up a whole new range of buyers, and obviously Porsche was a very attractive brand to those new buyers. So people bought these in their droves. This was the volume seller until about 2003 when Porsche released Cayenne. And that's really the reason that Porsche is still here today. Every 911 you see, every GT product, every Halo car, it's here now thanks to the Boxster, the Cayenne, and now the Macan. That's what's kept Porsche alive this long. But aside from all of that, this is a fantastic little car. It's given me a lot of worries, a lot of anxiety, also a lot of joy. What we're going to do now is pop the top, go for a little drive, and I'm going to talk you through all of this. So, see you in a sec. Okay, stopped at some lights here. First things first, this is a first car. I'm obviously not a 17-year-old. I'm 29, you can tell from my grey hairs, and by the fact that I can afford to have a Boxster as a first car. The use case for this car arose a year ago. We recently moved out of London. We moved out to home counties. We're in Hertfordshire. We do actually live in a nice town on a high street, which I'm on right now. We don't really need a car. We do have everything kind of on our doorstep, but we wanted to start doing road trips. We wanted to be able to go and see my family over Christmas without having to rely on trains, you know, just have days out, that sort of thing. All of these use cases are, you know, what you'd use a car like this for. I don't need it to be super economical. I don't mind it being a bit more expensive, and I kind of like the fact that it's a bit more special as well. You know, that's kind of the use case we had. So I started thinking about this sort of stuff. I was looking at like sort of Golf GTIs, that kind of thing. There's a lot in that kind of price bracket that's moderately fun, but nothing too crazy. I settled on a Boxster after visiting a couple of friends of ours, and boyfriend had recently bought his 996. He had a Boxster up until that point, a more modern one like a 718, and he bought kind of a budget 996, and I was amazed when he told me how much it was, and it was just so cool. And I'd never really thought about Porsches previously. I just assumed these were kind of unobtainium because, you know, if you know anything about the used market for Porsches right now, 993s, you know, good luck getting a decent one of those for less than 50 grand. 997s, you're probably looking at 30, 35 grand for a half decent one. 996s, you can get in at the bottom end of the market, really scraggly one for, let's say, 15 to 20K. Really, you probably want to be spending a bit more than that. But then Boxsters are even cheaper. I remember starting to look for these and was stunned at the amount of 5 to 10 grand Boxsters I was looking at. And you've got quite a few good options. This was a volume car, so there's a lot of them on the market. Obviously lots of different specs, lots of different colors. You could get a manual, you could get the auto at the time, which is the Tiptronic. That's what I've got because it fits my use case. If this were a weekend car, I'd probably have it as a manual. But I've got to do everything in this, and I live in a street that has a lot of traffic, and I do a lot of motorway stuff as well. So this kind of works pretty well for me. Again, absolutely get the manual if that's what you prefer. Yeah, so I was on Auto Trader kind of looking at a bunch of these, and while I was at home with my parents one weekend, saw one that I absolutely loved. It was this car. It's midnight blue, Metropole blue interior, matching roof, and it was the very late facelifted 986S. So it's got a slightly bigger engine. It's got the 3.2, roughly 260 horsepower, probably a bit less with the passage of time, of course. But good performance stats. Had all of the optional extras I wanted, like heated seats and so on. Also had kind of like an optional sort of like upgraded interior with more nice leather. I'll get onto the dislikes in a bit. Interior is one of the low points of these cars. It was basically the ideal spec for me. It had decent history, an insane amount of miles, I think 97,000 when I bought it. But it was near my parents as well, so I went to go have a look, fell in love, decided to buy it. Was as thorough as I thought I should have been at the time with my checks, and I'll get onto this point about why this is such a great first car, but some stuff came to light later on. The first thing that happened was a couple of weeks after I drove it back home for the first time, I started to get a gearbox issue. It was completely fine up until this point, but it started to, not that it didn't know what gear it was in, I didn't know what gear it was in because the drive icon started flashing on the instrument cluster, and I didn't know what gear I was in. It just said gear selector not engaged, which kind of almost makes it sound like you haven't put it in drive or something. Obviously I had. So did some digging, no conclusive answer really, so I decided to book in a gearbox service, and this, I thought at the time this was a mistake, but it actually turned out to be a really good thing. Was I took it to a very fancy Porsche specialist near me. I won't say which garage I took it to or which specialist I took it to. They did do a really good job and they helped me out a lot, but was amazed when they did a initial health check on the car, just a visual health check, not getting too into the weeds, and phoned me up a few days later to say, you're going to want to come in and have a look at this. So they basically showed me the printout of everything they thought was wrong, substandard about my little Boxster. And I won't go into absolutely everything, but I will tell you the headline figure. The bill itself was 25 grand, which I think if you're presented with a bill of 25 grand for a Boxster and you're half thinking about paying it, your better option probably is to get on We Buy Any Car, get rid of the Boxster and get yourself a nice 997 or something to play with instead. Obviously I was never going to pay that, and the reason why that estimate was so high was basically because they were all sourcing original Porsche parts, which, let's be honest, no kind of bargain Boxster or budget Boxster owner puts on their car unless absolutely necessary. So took all of that and then got on the forums and kind of tried to rationalize with myself what I should actually pay to get fixed with this car. And this is where the story kind of gets a bit better. So was put into contact with the absolute legend himself, a guy called Paul Lewis, runs a business called Talk Boxsters down in Sunbury, so just west of London. Paul got in touch with me after I messaged him and said, look, come down to the garage, I'll do a free health check for you, we'll work out what's actually wrong with this thing. So I thought, fantastic. I mean, worst case, everything the other specialist said is correct and I need to really get this car sorted. Best case, less is wrong than I thought, and we can get this in really good road going condition for a bit less money. So took it down to Paul one very cold February morning, I think it was, or January morning actually. And the very first thing we did was check the cam deviations of the engine. So you can only do this when it's really quite hot, and kind of plugged it into Paul's durometric and began to read the stuff. And basically, the reason this is important, and if you've done any research on Boxsters, you'll know about the famous IMS, RMS issues, bore scoring on later models of the Boxster. These cars' engines can go pop, and that's happened to people I know. It's a real thing. It's not particularly widespread, but it did affect, I think, something like 10 to 15% of cars. Depending on which year your model is, it might be more at risk of this. I think my car is generally lower risk because it's a bigger engine, later model. They'd sorted out some stuff with the engine block in particular, I know that for sure. But yeah, effectively, what happens is the intermediate shaft can sort of like get worn out, and it can basically fail, and that throws the engine timing off completely, which is very bad because it means your engine basically stops working with absolutely no warning signs at all. No engine management light comes up, nothing. You just sort of come to a stop on the motorway, for example, and you got to get the car trailered and get the engine rebuilt, which is everyone's worst nightmare. And an engine rebuild on this isn't cheap. It'll be more expensive on a 911, but even still, these M96 engines, you're probably looking at 15 grand plus to rebuild the engine, which is, you know, you just buy another one at that point, wouldn't you? And that's part of why Boxster values are so depressed at the moment. The thing is, a lot of these cars, especially the high mileage ones, will actually be fine, because the rationale is if that was going to happen, it would already have happened by now. And you know, that's probably the case for this car. I mean, who knows what could happen? I could get stranded in the middle of France on a big road trip and have to pay a lot to get this towed back to Blighty, but realistically it's probably not going to happen. And the reason why I'm a little bit more sure about that is because the camshaft deviations that we read indicated the engine basically hasn't moved at all since it was built. I think it's like 0.1 of a degree off on one bank and a couple of degrees off on the other bank. And I think I'd have to confirm this, maybe you can correct me in the comments, but I think you need to get to like sort of double-digit degrees of deviation before it's actually, you know, a worry and you should replace some stuff or maybe swiftly move the car on. So that was the best news of the day, knowing that my engine's pretty safe. I think we did a walk around the car, plenty of cosmetic stuff that isn't great, like swirls in the paint, marks. I really don't care too much about that. I know it's not going to be a concours example. The main thing we identified, in addition to the gearbox, obviously, that I originally wanted to get fixed, was actually the suspension. So this car spent pretty much all of its early life in Scotland and I think Cheshire, northwest of the UK. So I imagine because it's relatively high mileage, it has been used relatively frequently throughout the year. And that's a problem because in the UK, we salt our roads and we put grit on. So unless you've really got those bits well protected, you know, things are just going to rust over time. And that's exactly what happened here. You know, once we got underneath, all my suspension components were corroded. One of the springs had actually snapped, which would be an automatic MOT fail. But really, aside from, I think, the rear top mounts, everything needed to go. So that's basically what we started doing. I paid a few grand to get new suspension in my car, basically, and a little bit more to do some other bits. We did like a full service, we did a gearbox service, we fixed the gearbox issue, which, as it turns out, wasn't the switch. It was the gearbox sump, which basically looked like it had been left at the bottom of the sea, leaks everywhere. So we got that replaced. Picked up the car. A couple of weeks later, Paul had sent me about 50 million images of the work being carried out and videos, which I absolutely loved. That was the best part of the whole experience. Definitely softened the blow a bit. But yeah, now that I've got the car, honestly, first drive back I did, unbelievable. It felt so good. Every single corner that I take this round, you know, even now, a few months on, it is fully planted. I've had people follow me remarking on just how flat it corners at speed as well. And obviously it's still a sports suspension. I haven't changed anything about the ride height or the damping or anything. So it is basically stock settings, but you know, we've got bad roads here. It will still have bumps to deal with, and you'll probably see that come through on the video. To be honest, I don't care about that too much. That's more of an indictment on our country than anything else, especially not the car. But yeah, it's wonderful to own. As we come up to a rather long queue coming up to this roundabout, I'll kind of summarize that. That's one of the main reasons why I think this is such a great first car. As long as you've got a few grand saved away to basically put everything right, and then I would say, it remains to be seen how much it cost me to run this, but I would budget probably a couple of grand on like regular servicing repairs that come up. These are 20-year-old cars. The great thing about this is that in the space of a couple of months after I'd identified these problems, got it fixed, I kind of went through all of the emotions of enthusiast car ownership. Everything from this is ruining my life, how do I get rid of it? How do I, get it out of my life? All the way to the kind of satisfaction of seeing this work start to get carried out, and then the elation of getting the car back and it being everything I hoped it would be. Some people take years to experience that range of emotions. I got it all stuffed into a few weeks. So I've had my share of stress, let's put it that way. It's also taught me about what to look for when you're buying a car. If I were to go out and buy another car tomorrow to replace this, I would know exactly what to look for. If it was another Boxster, I would only buy one off Paul as well, because how rare is it you find a specialist for just Boxsters? There's lots of Porsche specialists, but very few. He's probably the only one that knows these cars so well. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. And I think the main thing I would do with any new car, especially one of these, and certainly a car this old, is just get it up on a ramp, have a look at what's lurking underneath. And if work definitely needs to be carried out and the car's not safe or unroadworthy or whatever, you can get that fixed, or you can simply walk away and save yourself a lot of bother. So that's another reason why it's a great first car. Just hear that and feel that as well. This is so much fun to drive. Even with the auto that everyone kind of told me is a bit rubbish, slow changes, jerkiness, really, honestly, people make these things out to be like a 70s Slashmatic. It just isn't. These are perfectly fine in any situation. And the thing is, it learns your driving inputs fairly quickly. I could take this to a track, let's say, and just leave it in auto, and it would learn what I'm going to do within about a lap. I don't need to be manually shifting gears. It's not as quick as like a PDK would work. I've driven a PDK brand new Cayman around the track that you honestly don't need to intervene at all. That's just incredibly competent and knows exactly what you want to do innately. This takes a bit more going, but honestly, completely fine. Aside from when it's cold and it's kind of like sticking in first a bit too long, it's completely fine. The rest of the car, it's just so dialed in. Particularly good that I've got the new suspension. Geo's all done on that. They're all modern components, obviously, so the way this handles is fantastic. I really like as well how linear the power delivery is. You get kind of like, we talk about, one end of the spectrum. You get certain cars that have all of the power and all of their torque right at the beginning of the rev band, so you don't really need to go above like 3,000 or 4,000 revs to get what you want to get out of the car. Something like this, it's very, very linear. I tend to find that like the power kicks in around where the noise kicks in, which is sort of around the middle of the dial cluster or the rev counter, sort of like 4,000 RPM. It'll go up to just above 7,000, and you can really rev this thing out. It sounds fantastic, and you get that sort of surge of power coming all through that rev band. Way on the other end of the spectrum might be something like a Honda S2000. I've never driven one, in fairness, but from what I hear, those are also brilliant engines. They sound amazing, but you really need to get it to the top of that rev band to get the most out of it. So, probably not something you can have fun with in every situation. This, I really do feel like I can have fun in a lot of use cases. So, that's just one fantastic thing about the car. Has a weird amount of creature comforts. Like the interior itself, I don't absolutely love. It was a low point for Porsche in terms of quality. I don't absolutely love modern Porsche interiors, to be honest. But this is particularly plastically, and a lot of these cars, are 20, 25 years old. So unless they've been meticulously maintained, you are absolutely going to see, you know, some wear on some of these interior plastics and leathers. I think I'd like to get my interior reconditioned at some point, pay for like proper valeting and detailing interior. But honestly, it's great. Driving position's good. Passengers are always comfortable in this. Seats are lovely. They're not uncomfortable. You can actually, this has got heated seats as well, so I can use it all throughout the winter. Good on long journeys. You don't get, you know, tired of what you're looking at or bored. And you know, you can retrofit whatever infotainment you want. Obviously, these aren't going to come with like CarPlay as standard, but you can put that in pretty cheaply. And yeah, kind of has everything else you need from your main car, I would say. A couple of other likes with the car. It's really weirdly good for like long journeys, and that's not just because it's comfortable, as I've mentioned. It's also because the MPG is weirdly good. You get, I think when I'm kind of caning it, you know, maybe driving around town and that sort of thing, I'd be lucky to get much above 20, but as soon as you get it on a motorway and, you know, you're just sat at 70 or whatever, it'll do like 33 mpg. I got 33 mpg on this, you know, on a run back from Wales, so good 200 miles. And that included a bit of like town driving as well and traffic. So really, really good for an engine this old, and particularly a bloody 3.2 litre flat six. You just don't expect that. So that's a nice surprise. The practicality on this point, I cannot believe I forgot to mention this. There are two boots in this car, and they're actually like completely different boots as well, so you can put completely different things in them. We actually got all of our Christmas shopping, all of our bags, and went back to my family's for like a week over Christmas, you know, just using the Boxster, which I think is incredible. There is so much room, and you know, as you can see from the beginning of this video, I actually basically fit in the front boot. I think the thing I love about this car is that it's teaching me how to drive, and it's modern enough that I don't get into any situations where I'm having actual difficulty. You know, it's simple enough and easy enough to drive that I never feel like I run out of talent. I was doing a bit of a run in first gear just then, and you know, pretty much foot to the floor going round a corner, and I wasn't even feeling it slipping, which is great. Obviously, you want to get pretty fresh rubber on these, and ideally tires that match the specs. If you see one that has different brands on each corner or like really worn tires, just walk away, because that's probably an indication for how it's been treated by the previous owner or owners. Yeah, I mean, look, it's been a year of ownership. I'm just absolutely bloody loving life in my Boxster. It does everything I need to do. I can use it all year. It's really competent. It's exotic enough, and you know, no one would believe that this car costs what it costs these days. You know, even me, as a huge petrolhead, until I actually looked at these things, I didn't know that they cost this much. I just assumed they were kind of like 15, 20 grand or whatever. But no, they're really cheap, and there are a lot of dogs out there, I would imagine. You know, you've got to sort the wheat from the chaff, or ideally buy from someone you trust. So yeah, look, fantastic, fantastic car. I think I'll have this, especially with the amount of cash I've spent on the bloody thing, I will probably have this for like 4 or 5 years. We only need one car. We don't have plans to move further out where we might need like, I guess, a more sensible everyday car. This kind of works for now, and I've got a lot of stuff planned for it. Now that it's fully fixed and somewhat reliable, literally haven't had an issue since it got fixed a few months ago. We're planning to do some road trips with it. I want to go to France and Switzerland next year, do quite a long trip, multiple UK road trips. We'd like to go up to the Scottish borders, do some driving, up to the Lake District perhaps, maybe back to Wales, which we did earlier this year, but unfortunately didn't have brilliant weather. There's so much I want to do in this thing, and I do think it's kind of the perfect car for those sort of trips, because it's easy, it can sit on a motorway, you know, it's comfy, it's reliable, but when you want to have fun, it is so fun, and it's a type of accessible fun where, you know, you put your foot down, you're not going to be pressed into the back of your seat. There's not a wave of torque that sort of sloshes over you. and you can stick it around the bend and not really worry too much. The back's not going to step out, you're not going to get understeer on turn-in. The weight distribution is pretty much perfect with these things, and it's just a great little car. This is coming from someone who didn't even like these very much when they were around. I always thought the fried egg headlights were, you know, a bit kitschy. They sort of didn't really work, but now, and I think particularly on these facelifted Boxsters, the 986.2, they just look great. It's the perfect first car, unless you're a 17-year-old and the insurance is about £12 million. If you're someone like me, you can tax and insure one of these for a year for £1,000, which, yeah, it's too much, especially the tax. We won't get into that, but you know, to drive a Porsche, I think it's a pretty good entry price, really. That kind of ends my review of the Boxster. I've got no idea where I'm going to take this channel. You know, there might be more content on this, road trip content like I mentioned. I think what I want to do, and I'll definitely be filming some of this over the next few weeks, is there are a lot of really cool car meetups, car shows in the UK that I never really see get much airplay on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and so on. And I think it'd be cool to showcase some of that, sort of learn how to film those as well. There is a lot of amazing stuff going on in this country, particularly in the summer, but there is always a dearth of content throughout the winter. So hopefully I can remedy that a little bit. But yeah, we'll see where it goes, because I think the purpose in life is to find your passion, and the meaning of life is to share that passion with others. So yeah, maybe that's this, and that's what we're doing here. We'll see. So thank you so much for watching, and yeah, more videos coming soon.